So we all heard about the various insights from behavioral science and psychology. And how does this affect the fundraising planning? Well, there are three levels of it. Strategic planning, which is about long-term growth, new products, new markets, so on. Then we have campaign planning. So what are our offers and what should go to which audience and with which channel? And lastly, we have communication planning, which is all about the content. What should we include? How should we frame it? How should we present it? Now, at Instinctiv, we mostly focused on communication planning so far. And today, we're going to try and present a framework that will cover campaign planning. Behavioral science also can affect strategic planning, but this is not what we're going to discuss here today. So our focus for today is how behavioral science can provide a new framework for campaign planning. Now, I guess you gathered so far that the main insight that behavioral science gave us is about us and how we behave and what type of people we are. Maybe this morning, some of you thought we were rational. I did. But that we maximize our benefits, we want to minimize the cost, we have awareness of all our actions and the reasons why we behave this way, and we are not influenced by random subconscious factors, right? We weigh up the pros and cons when we make a decision and we act on it. But various findings show that what we actually do is we live in the moment. And we are influenced by the context. We are influenced about how things are presented to us. We're influenced by random numbers. So what affects us is our memory, our cognitive load, how much information we have to process, the way this information is presented, and also by our emotions. Up until recently, they had a separate model for decision making that didn't include emotions. They thought that it was irrelevant to decision making. Until some random guy had a wooden stick through his head, he couldn't process emotions anymore because that area was damaged. And that immediately showed how crucial emotions are for everyday functioning. He couldn't decide what to wear. He couldn't decide how to go to work. So essential, really minor decisions that we don't even think about are affected by our emotional processing. And the other key comment inside is this. So we believe we have a reason and then we act on it. But most of the times it's the other way around. So Daniel Kahneman is one of the lead thinkers in the decision-making field, and he talked about System 1 and System 2. System 1 is the primitive one, is intuitive. We don't always have conscious awareness of what's going on there. It's emotional and it reacts. And then you have System 2, which is slower. It processes information and you are conscious about what's going on in there. So you would think, or you would hope, that when there is an input, anything, it could be from fundraising ask or any other marketing ask, you have the autopilot who immediately reacts to this message. But then you have System 2, which is the rational one, processing this more carefully, doing the cost-benefit analysis, and then if it needs to override autopilot, it does so and leads to a decision. But what Kahneman said in the quote before is that actually what happens is this. We make a decision based on a moment, an intuition, something, an emotional reaction, and then System 2 kicks in only to come up with a narrative and an explanation, a post-rationalization as to why we behave the way we did. And that's because we need to have a reason. And this actually explains why when you ask people why they behave a certain way, they can't really pinpoint the true reason. They can come up with a reason, but that doesn't mean it reflects the actual why of why they behave the way they did. So we don't support the charities we love necessarily, but we end up loving the charities that we support. It's the other way around. So you don't need to convince people, just they can give you on an emotional level, and then they end up loving you because they did. We are all surrounded by a wealth of information, and what this means is that the more overloaded we are, the more automatic processes will take over, because we don't have the time, the luxury, or even the cognitive capacity to process everything around us. So we need to use some shortcuts if we are to function in our everyday life. So when there isn't any type of interaction, there are certain stages. So there is a touch point, let's say a DM letter that arrives. I need to pay attention to it, to pick it up. And then I need to actually open it and process it, process the information that is in it. And then I'm required to make a decision, and that decision will lead to an experience. Now, the context and how the ask is framed, or everything, the presentation of this DM letter is framed, and the timing will affect all of these stages. Whether I will pay attention to it, am I in a rush? Does it stand out? Then I will pick it up. Whether I process it, again, if I have enough time, I'll probably read a 3 pages letter. If I don't have much time, even though I picked it up, I will then put it down. And the same goes for decision. Emotion also affects how you respond. The emotional state you're in will affect whether you'll pay attention. If you're overwhelmed by something, you might miss some of the information that is around you. If you're primed emotionally, let's say you're in a church and you receive a donation envelope, that primes prosocial behavior, being in a church and being altruistic. So then that means that your emotional state actually supports this decision. And for each stage, we have other factors that can affect you. Like, you will pay attention to something if it's familiar to you. You'll recognize it, you're more likely to pick it up. Or if it supports your goals. If you had intention to be a better person, and then you see a DM pack, oh, here's an opportunity to actually fulfill my goal. Here's a way to be a better person. How do we process things? Is affected by, is it easy? If the letter is, like I said before, overloaded with information, or if it's not easy for me to take away the key message, and that goes for that presentation, if everything that I say here is too confusing or too overwhelming or too much, you switch off. You're not going to process it. Same goes for any marketing communications. Decisions will depend on various things, whether you are in a public place, whether other people behave the same way, like the findings showed, whether it is easy to do so. If it's easy, you're more likely to respond than if it's not. So all of these factors will affect all these stages and the experience that you're going to have at the end. And that experience will be stored in your memory, and it will affect your future behavior. Because like it was mentioned by Michael early this morning, we want to feel that we make sense and that we are consistent to our previous behavior. So if we have done something once, we're more likely to repeat that behavior. So based on these insights, we have two models. The traditional, if you like, persuasion model that says, if you want people to do something, give them all the reasons why they should do it. Give them all the information. Convince them that it's the right thing to do or the smart thing to do. So you have perceptions drive behavior, but what we're saying here today is that it's actually the other way around. If people behave a certain way, then they will change their perceptions to fit their behavior. They will think that this is actually the right thing to do. So instead of trying to inform and convince people, build associations, make it easy for them to connect with you, to reply to a communication. Create these moments that will take advantage of our impulses and our emotional engagement. and these then will lead to consistent behavior. So content is still important, but we think that it comes after the context and the framing and the timing. If you find the right time, the right way to present the information, and if it's easy to process, easy to reply, people will engage much more than if you present them with content of information that's trying to convince them. And lastly, do not ask people why they did things, or ask them because it's interesting to know what they think about their behavior, but don't rely on that in order to form your communication planning. Actually look at what did this person do? What is he interested in? His action will tell you much more than his words. So that takes us from a charity-centric to a supporter-centric approach. So everything should be driven by what the next best action is for that specific supporter based on their previous behavior. It's not a standard program for everyone, which I guess you know this and you are adapting your programs to reflect this behavior. This is only to stress this point that you need to do this to the extreme. Like, take a single supporter, what did they engage with, make sure you adapt the next step, the next communication to reflect that past action. Focus on what is relevant to them and what is relevant to the behavior they previously engaged with. Optimize the channel to reflect their preferences or to reflect the communication. So choose a channel that they prefer with, and choose a channel that actually optimizes the material you want to communicate to them. And success shouldn't only be financial benefit, it's also about interactions, because the more interactions they have with you, even if they're not financial, then the more loyal they become to you, the more they create an identity with your charity, and that leads to consistent behavior in the future. So we're talking about interactions, that takes us to journeys, and we all know that journeys have different legs. So we have a trigger, and it could come from a supporter. I donate, so that's a trigger for you to send me a thank you letter, or I receive a communication from you, or there is an emergency appeal triggered by an external event. So then comes the product or service that we want people to engage with, and that links together to create an offer. There could be multiple offers that originate from the same trigger, so you can adapt that to the specific supporter. And then it's the time to choose the time and the place and the context to contact them. And that will lead to outcome. And the outcome could be no outcome or unfavorable, or they actually respond to you. And then again, that becomes a trigger for you to do the next thing. But the main message is not this, we all know this. The message is journeys can't be prescribed. They differ between supporters. So one supporter may do an action that leads to that journey, another supporter may have a different journey, and then you have supporters engaging on themselves, that triggers another journey. You have external events that trigger a different journey. So you have all these different possibilities and the way to move forward is determined by what the next best action is for that specific supporter in that context. So the outcomes will vary based exactly on these legs and how they should be adapted for each individual case. So from the supporter's perspective, they start with, let's say here, they are unaware of you. So then you need to increase your familiarity and they become aware of you. Then they may have a first interaction, which is with one product. And then you start thinking, what's the next best action for this person? You could lead them towards multiple interactions with the same product they engage with, or think whether it's a good time to try to move them to two products, multiple products, or if it's more beneficial for this specific supporter to move them to habitual interactions, regular giving, with that same product they engaged with. Or is it more, does it make more sense for this supporter to move them down to more products? Everything will depend on what they did before. What was that first interaction? What did that make you do afterwards? How did they respond there? And that will determine whether you go across or down. So let's take an example. Let's say I made a cash gift, and that is a supporter trigger, me, myself. Then I have a charity trigger, which is a thank you, mail, email, whatever that is, from you. And then what I do is I visit the portal, maybe because you included in there some engagement message driving me to the portal. So I visited the portal, and what I did there is I had a look at raffles. And so then that triggered you to send me a raffle pack, to which I responded. And then maybe ask me whether I want to become a regular giver to participate in your weekly lottery. And I sign up, and you thank me. Then there is, unfortunately, there was a Nepal emergency. That triggered me to give a cash gift. You give me an update. But then you continue back to what engaged me in the first place. You send me another raffle, and then ask me to upgrade, and then send me the next one. And then you're trying to maybe cross-sell to regular giving, give a cash donation on a regular basis. So a different donor, after the first initial gift and visiting the portal, they may have engaged with events. So that takes them to a completely new journey. Just because they engage with different information on your website, that gives you enough to go with so that you can send appropriate information to them afterwards. So they sign up, they participate, you thank them, they may be interested in a petition, you thank them. But again, you have the external events that trigger also behavior, like a Nepal emergency or a political event. But then you continue with what they engaged initially. So you first ask for that regular cash gift before you try to go to raffles. So these are two completely different journeys based on what the supporter engaged with initially. So how can we create these moments of interaction? How does our planning, what does our planning should take into account? First of all, for acquisition, it's all about the moment. Find the right moment to engage with your supporters. Don't try to convince them. Try to create an emotional, instinctive, impulsive response by creating this right moment. Then, make sure you welcome them. Do not ask them for a gift straight away. A thank you letter should be a thank you letter on its own. It's not thank you, give some more. Thank you, welcome, you're part of the family. Introduce some identity in there. Delight them, make them feel special. We talked about how important perceived impact is. That's a way to overcome maybe overhead aversion. Stress how much their donation is helping and is making a difference despite the overhead aversion. Not the aversion. Reinforce their behavior. That could be either non-financial ask or soft financial ask. Try to engage them with different aspects of your activities. Like take part, volunteer, take part in an event, invite them, reinforce their relationship with them. And if you're going to ask for additional money at this stage, make sure that reflects what they did initially. Don't try to cross-sell or upgrade just yet. Then you can extend, and that means trying to move them to different products, trying to make them regular givers, regular donors. But all of this is not new, maybe. The key message is it has to be responsive for everyone. It has to reflect my preferences and my previous actions. So on this journey, that's where acquisition occurs, that's what welcome is, reinforce and extend, and all relates to the next best action for each supporter. So does this work? Will it work? We don't know. It's a framework. But let's see how we could plan out for a new donor welcome journey. So for a welcome, what you need to do is thank them. Provide minimal additional information. Don't send them a pack, a thank you pack with everything your organization is doing and every aspect of it. Just thank them, make them feel special, make them really experience that warm glow. That will keep them giving. The happier people feel, the more they give. So make them feel proud about what they did and engage them. Offer them a way to engage with you, find out more on their own without you forcing everything to them. Ask them to visit your webpage and look at videos, watch videos, comment. And then when you're trying to reinforce this relationship, like I said, it could be non-financial or maybe soft ask. The communication should be easy to engage with and easy to reply to. Default decisions, Lee talked a lot about default decisions. Maybe you have an ask, a soft ask with a default option there. All they need to do is send it back. Easy to do. And then when you're trying to extend, that's where you really need to be careful about what's the next best action for this person. There is no answer here because that depends on the person's behavior. So just make sure you acknowledge all previous responses and all responses in general. Moving forward. And finally, what you want to do is really cement that commitment. If people made a commitment, they will stick to it and they're more likely to follow it through. So if you, for regular donations, asking people whether they will be with you for next year may actually lead to higher retention rates. We need to test that. I'm not sure, but it may, because making a commitment leads to consistent behavior. So this is a plan of how it could look like, and this is the overview of the framework. Now I will pass on to Andrea.